few presentations from eminent personalities from different parts of the world. As you may recall, during the pre-lunch session, when we were talking about reconstruction in the north, our friendly neighbor, India, was highlighted, and the support that was given by the government of India was highlighted as an important factor in our success. In this session, we are fortunate to have a representation from the Indian government in the form of Major General G.S. Shergill. He will be addressing this gathering and deliver his presentation on Indian assistance in reconstruction and resettlement in Sri Lanka. Major General Shergill is a serving Indian Army officer and currently the General Officer Commanding of a division. This General Officer, during his distinguished career, has done his mandatory tour of duty, which includes 5 tenures in conflict zones within the country as well as abroad. He is a graduate of the Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, and the Army War College. In 1989, he gained a master's degree in Defence Studies from the University of Madras, and in year 2000, a Master of Philosophy degree in the same subject. He has also attended prestigious courses at the School of Armored Warfare and the Infantry School. Commissioned into the infantry, the Major General has been an instructor at the Infantry School and at the prestigious Defence Services Staff College, Wellington. He commanded an infantry battalion, brigade, and sub-area in active operations and is presently commanding a division actively committed in low-intensity conflict operations. Incidentally, charter of his duties includes resettlement, reconciliation, and execution of projects for reconstruction. Well-traveled, he has also represented his country as a United Nations military observer to Central America and El Salvador, where he gained an insight into disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of, or in other words, DDR. So he is well versed with all 5 R's. The General's wide experience makes him an ideal speaker today, and I'm sure we are all going to benefit from the wealth of experience and insights of General G.S. Shergill. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Respected Commander of the Sri Lankan Army, guests and fellow officers, ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed grateful to the Sri Lankan Army and the Government of Sri Lanka to have given us a slot in this all-important seminar for which the deliberations have been going on. Just before I start my presentation, I would like to bring out that any reconstruction, rehabilitation, and reconciliation effort is never same for a particular country or all over the countries in the world. It was brought out by various speakers today that we cannot template a particular kind of assistance or reconciliation. Therefore, it all depends on the host country or the country which is totally involved in their effort to make sure that the people of their country are integrated as per their design in consultation with each other. That is what the Sri Lankan government has done, and all others are peripheral actors. We are there to support their effort. The other countries should support their effort in consultation with them. With this, I want to bring out a small quote here. It may appear to be irrelevant today because it was made about 70 years back by father of my nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And he said it about Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as that time it was called. But then when I dwelt on it, I realized that quote is still relevant to any country of the world, be it country A, B or C, without naming any country, I would say. Just have a look at it. He says, it is, at least it should be, impossible for India and Ceylon to quarrel. We are the nearest neighbors. We are inheritors of a common culture. But even as blood brothers sometimes differ, so do next door neighbors. And like brothers, they usually adjust their differences and are often more closely knit together after the clearance. Now, if you replace the word India and Ceylon to people of different ethnicity, or if I may be permitted to say, the people of ethnicities in Sri Lanka, then all others are the same. Personnel of Sri Lanka are blood brothers. If they have differed at some time, as he says, as the next door neighbors, like brothers, I'm sure they would adjust their differences and work for the reconciliation, which is the aim of this seminar. The father of nation made this did the statement, as I said, about 70 years back, but it is still relevant. Even today, perhaps, it is more relevant, with Sri Lanka striding toward a brighter tomorrow, post the historic clearance or end of the conflict, which affected past of Sri Lanka for over a quarter of a century. India is Sri Lanka's closest neighbor. Relations between the two countries have matured and diversified with the passage of time, encompassing all areas of contemporary relevance. The shared cultural heritage of the two countries and extensive people-to-people interaction provide the foundation to build a multifaceted partnership. During recent years, this relationship has been marked and strengthened by interactions at the close contact at the highest political level, growing trade and investment, cooperation in the field of development, education, culture, defense, as well as broad understanding on major issues of international interest. Large part of South Asia have made great progress economically, socially, and politically over the last few decades. Yet, there are a number of challenges that continue to beset the region that hold back the true potential of our countries, individually as well as collectively as South Asia. These include terrorism, extremism, and religious fundamentalism, to name a few, and use of these as instruments of state policy, I regret to say, by some of the countries. However, India and Sri Lanka have shown the capacity and the will to rise above these constraints. The end of conflict in Sri Lanka has brought about a great possibility for peace and stability in Sri Lanka and its neighborhood, and build a better future for all our people. This has also opened up greater options for Sri Lanka and India to cooperate and enlarge our areas of engagement. India had strongly supported the right of the government of Sri Lanka to act against LTTE. At the same time, there was genuine concern for the welfare of the civilian population, with nearly 300,000 civilian housed in camps for the internally displaced persons. It must be understood that each conflict is unique, as I said earlier, due to the nature of grievances and methodology of overcoming the conflict. It may be an interstate or intrastate conflict. It may have been overcome by UN peacekeeping missions or efforts, or by international forces as we have seen in our neighborhood, or by the security forces of the concerned state as it happened in the case of Sri Lanka. But legacies of these conflicts stays more or less the same and includes widespread population displacement, damaged infrastructure, reduced productive capacity, devastated revenue base, and erosion of human and social capital, greatly reduced security, and an increased proportion of the people needing social assistance, to name a few. Collectively, these legacies place a very heavy burden on post-conflict societies. The challenge is to correctly analyze and undertake suitable measures to overcome it, which I'm glad to notice, for whatever it is worth it, a small man to say these things, the Sri Lanka government has done exceedingly well to sort out these problems in a very, very short span of time. Post-conflict focus areas. Much has been said about these focus areas, but the cost of repetition I would like to bring out that to achieve a broad-based recovery from the conflict, countries have to face a daunting range of tasks and need to focus on security, as was correctly identified. Unless there is security, no other effort can take place. Governance, which is the biggest sufferer during the conflict, it has to be put on rails again. Humanitarian and social welfare well-being, which is the first thing to be done as is being, or as it was done in Sri Lanka. Economic stabilization, which is an ongoing process, is currently undertaken. Infrastructure development, much has been said about it, and this seminar is all about that. And justice, and finally the reconciliation, which is the ultimate aim of conflict resolving. As far as India is concerned, we have had varied experiences in resolving the post-conflict situations. We are aware that winning the peace can be much more difficult than winning a conflict or a war. Peace in conflict areas is at best fragile and needs to be nurtured with caution, considering the stakes involved for all sections of the society. People will blame those in power for the death of their loved ones. Whether their loved ones died of a bullet, lack of medical care, or even lack of potable water. What matters is that the government or the occupying forces, that is the other forces which come in, fail to prevent a preventable death. This leaves a mark on the psyche of the population. He is not concerned that the person died of natural causes or died of, as I brought out earlier, of a lack of medical care and things. He is only looking that in the times of so and so, when they were in command, my kith and kins, they died. So therefore it leaves a permanent mark on the psyche of the individual. And that is all about reconciliation later on. The biggest challenge is to overcome the damage caused to the psyche of the concerned population, and strategy for stabilization and reconstruction must keep this vital aspect in mind, both during and after the conflict. While stabilization is key to ending violence, reconstruction helps prevent a return to violence by addressing long-term drivers of the conflict. As you are all aware, Government of Sri Lanka has correctly identified 5 Rs. We have talked about these at length today, but what I would like to bring out is that as the time passes, first 4 Rs pave the way for reconciliation. To that extent, I think the efforts that we have seen since morning are in the right direction, and in times to come, as the time passes, as I said, the reconciliation will take place. India has responded spontaneously to any appeal for assistance by Sri Lankan government to tackle its problem, whether it was post-tsunami or post-conflict. The Government of India put in place a robust program of assistance and resettlement. In 2009, India announced a grant of 12 billion Sri Lankan rupees for relief and rehabilitation. Certain areas where focused assistance to support the effort of Sri Lankan government were identified, and they are livelihood and shelter to include immediate requirement for shelter, sustenance, and long-term requirements for accommodation. This is the first requirement. The revival of the agriculture sector, because it deals with day-to-day livelihood of the people, and as we have brought out and as we have seen earlier, the northern parts of the country are predominantly agro-based economy. Education and capacity building to include construction of schools and scholarships, information technology initiatives in the form of e-learning centers, healthcare including supply of medicines and constructions of hospitals, vocational training with an aim to harness youth and empower women, cultural revival, industrial development, connectivity, and transport requirements. Now, all these things put together bring about these 5 Rs. Every project that was identified, it was guided by certain qualitative requirements with the interest of population foremost in mind, to ensure that it was participative in nature, it provided a sustainable advantage, it met the aspirations of a very large portion of the affected populace, and impacted maximum portion of target population. Without going into any more on this, I would like to come straight to the India's assistance and the current perspective. As far as the livelihood and shelters are concerned, one of the major challenges post-conflict was rehabilitation of internally displaced persons, as was brought out. India supplied 250,000 livelihood packs to the displaced persons, comprising of food, clothes, and medicines immediately after the conflict. Government of India also supplied shelter material and construction material for reconstruction of shelters and repair of damaged houses to enable large number of families to go back to their original habitats. During the visit of President of Sri Lanka to India in June 2010, India assured construction of 50,000 houses at the cost of Sri Lankan 35 billion rupees. This project is in the final stages of completion. Besides meeting the housing requirement, what is more important is that all these projects collectively will generate millions of man days of employment for the local population, because it is participative in nature. All these houses will be completed by early 2015. I talked about the agriculture assistance. Since it's the primary means of livelihood in affected areas, assistance to the tune of 824 million Sri Lankan rupees was provided in the form of implements, seeds, and tractors to jumpstart the revival of local economy through agriculture renewal. Education and capacity building. This being an important area for long-term perspective, and it had to be started in right earnest right in the beginning. Education to the affected population have been taken care of by provision of scholarships, training of teachers, establishment of language labs, and distribution of computers, etc. It's an ongoing program and will help spread quality education. Beside these efforts, 79 rural schools who got damaged during the conflict, and as it was brought out during the previous deliberations, have been renovated in Kilinochchi, Mullaitivu, and Wavunia educational zones. Based on the request of Eastern University through Government of Sri Lanka, the revival of Faculty of Siddha Medicine at Trincomalee was undertaken to enable students to pursue their career in Siddha Medicine. Medical equipment was also supplied to general hospitals at Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu to improve medical facilities. These hospitals treat more than 500,000 people every year. Beside these, a new 150-bedded hospital is also being constructed at Dikoya. Four vocational training centers to impart training in various vocations have been established to enlarge scope of employment within the country and abroad. Vocational training for women in 7 trades identified by the Government of Sri Lanka has also been undertaken through self-employed women's associations. The project has made a huge impact on the livelihood of women-headed families and the war widows. Connectivity and transport infrastructure. The major infrastructure projects are being flashed on the view foil. To restore this connectivity, reduce the travel time, and increase economic activity in the region, major railway and rail bus projects are underway. I am told the rail bus project is very, very famous with the local people. These are in various stages of completion and will be completed in early 2015. India has also expressed its willingness to assist Government of Sri Lanka in developing Palali as a civilian airport. Besides these, significant efforts are on to ensure cultural revival, industrial development, and provision of much needed electricity for any worthwhile venture. Demining and provision of artificial limbs are ongoing process. I have seen and we've been assured that 98% of the work on demining has been finished, and that there are just a very minuscule number, that is about 2%, and that also is going to be completed in the next fortnight or by middle of this month, which is even less than a fortnight. I have only one submission to make, that the mines have a very bad habit of appearing at the wrong time at the wrong place and hitting a wrong man. So therefore, this effort will have to be continued perhaps for some more time to come, and ensure that nobody gets his limb blown off because of some urgency or hurry in undertaking this task which was undertaken. Industries like tourism, fishing, telecommunication, banking, and financial services are being given necessary attention in consultation with Government of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, incidentally, is the largest trading partner and priority destination for direct investment for India. All projects, as I said earlier and as you would have seen, are being undertaken or completed in complete coordination with the Government of Sri Lanka and in partnership with host institutions. They may be anyone decided by the Government of Sri Lanka, an organization as per the terms of reference jointly arrived at with them. Each project is just a step toward reconstruction and rehabilitation of the affected personnel. Today, India-Sri Lanka relationship is strong and poised for a quantum jump by building on the rich legacy of historical linkages and strong economic and developmental partnerships that have been forged in the recent years. However, there is much to be done and miles to go, as they say. Let us, in our shared quest for peace and prosperity, sail forward together. Thank you, gentlemen. I have finished.